Hello and welcome to another Developer Diary. So this time I'm going to be focused mostly on the visual side of things and a bunch of updates and things like that that I've been doing there on the game. So let's dive on in. So one of the first things you might notice is there are some pretty major changes in terms of some of the visual aspects. One of the big ones being is that there is now this edge detection filter running over everything. So I've got this as a post-processing effect. So I really like how this has actually looked. It's integrated really well with the high-def pipeline in terms of sort of the high-def visuals there with that sort of slightly more stylized art style that get with having the edge detection on there. So really, really happy with how that's looking. One of the other things is the first passes in terms of getting updated fonts in, and a lot of the stats we can see those updating. And we've already got, I've done a bit of a pass, can see on the visuals, so getting some consistent stylings in terms of font sizing, thing like that. So let's get in motion, go half speed, and then we'll be able to see a little bit more of the terrain. So with that lighting as well, that's working really nicely with how that looks with the visuals. I've done a bunch of fixes for things. Obviously need to resize that text there a little bit. And all of the carriages, that visual passes happened, a bunch of small sort of little bits of fixes, things like of that happening. I've bumped up a lot of the storage for things like the dedicated storage carriages. They actually hold quite a chunk more here. At the moment it's a fairly low amount, but that's actually something that will scale up quite a bit. So carriages are holding a bit more. The mechanics for all of the upgrades are in and working, including some of the ones where that upgrade only gets added on at the end of the train. So if I switch this, and what I'm going to do is we'll go to our scene view, and I'll go to where the train is. And so I can test the unlocking of things through this. So we'll see the unlocking is working. That's got our initial set of ones. We've only unlocked guardrails, but if I unlock a couple more, then those appear in nicely. So things like the railings, those are working well. The lightning rods are now correctly appearing, because what was happening was it would sometimes have both sets of lightning rods, which was not intended. And if I add in the emergency retrieval system and unlock that, it gets added to the end. And if I then chuck in another carriage, that'll actually get relocated back to the end. So it's one that will always appear at the very, very end there, which is great. Like that was the intended behavior, and it's nice to see that sort of working really well with it. The engines, I need to fix up the mesh there. It's not showing the correct stuff for the engines, but that's something where I can very easily add in a bunch of the engine upgrades. So if I add in engine 2, 3, and 4, that will likely fix it. I'll get rid of that empty one, unlock those, and then we've got our engines appearing. So that's the fully upgraded ones. That's going to have increased the speed. So we should, if we go back to the game view, notice, and this does happen, this is a side effect with Unity of when switching from the scene view to the game view like of that, it's going to have the outlines a little bit wrong. But our speed, even at the half speed, has gone up, and we'll be able to get up to a faster speed. This will be something where one of the things that you'll have to balance in the game is that sort of power usage, because the faster you're going, the more power you will use. And as you use more power, that then means you need to have more battery storage available. So that's going to be one of the key things that needs to be balanced. Installing extra upgrades also adds weight to the train as well. So that's something where that will affect the power to weight ratio, which the power to weight ratio does impact very directly on what our maximum speed is. So that's going to be a crucial aspect that folks will need to balance. I'm going to be adding in extra things in here as well. So one of the things that is not in there yet, but will come in particular when I have really large trains. One of the things that I want to have there is the ability to easily teleport between different carriages, just to make it a bit simpler to get around. There's obviously going to be the visual styling as well, texturing everything. But at the moment, I'm really happy with, in general, how these visuals are looking. These will be getting painted. They'll be fairly simple sort of painting on them. It's not going to be something where there's a lot of extra details. Probably make some key use of emissive things like if that in areas, that's going to be, I think, an important thing just to get some good effects there. Performance is still sitting pretty solid. So it's managing to hit a pretty decent performance. There's not really anything extra in terms of visual effects that I'm looking at adding, and there's potentially going to be some that I'll be able to remove once I've got everything colored in there. I might not actually need everything. There's also been some improvements in terms of the behavior when I chuck in another scrap collection car. So if I chuck one in and we add in another carriage, keep going till we get one that's a siphon. So it should soon be able to be collecting more stuff. I don't have another siphon in yet. Let's chuck in a bunch more ones, and actually I'll also chuck in second level for the siphon. Unlock that. That'll let it collect more stuff. So at the moment, we'll see it's not actually collecting anything. And that is because one of the things I made sure is in there is if you're going too fast, you actually can't collect stuff. So that's where the siphon upgrades come in handy. The more sort of you upgrade it, you will get to the point where at the fullest of speed, you can actually be still collecting stuff. So if I go and lower our speed, probably to about half, may end up needing to lower more than that. We should see it's starting to collect things again. Now, if I head over and take a look here when it's doing this, so before once it got to the point of being full, it would just actually stop picking up stuff, and stuff could get sort of stuck in the air, things like that, and I had just a lazy version of just destroying things, which worked, but not ideal. So what will actually now happen is when it gets to the point of being full, any ones that were sort of in flight, what will happen to them is they get a collider added onto them, they also get a rigid body added onto them, and then they were just allowed to fall to the ground. So that works a lot better, and I have intentionally sort of set that so that, because those could be quite large, they could be problematic for collision, because you could, if things just manage to hit exactly right, you could end up with them embedded into the actual train, which want to not have that. So those are configured so that they will actually not collide with the train or the player. So that means that if we do have that situation where we've gone and collision, it ends up going through the train, it's not actually going to cause any potential gameplay breaking bugs, because I don't want the player to have to deal with there being obstacles on the actual carriage itself. So navigating obstacles isn't an intended part of what I want the player to have to deal with. So far that's hoovering up things pretty well. I'm going to add in the next level of siphon upgrade because that will let them start hoovering in larger objects, which will mean we hit that point of it filling up a lot sooner. So one of the things I will be adding in, because of the fact that the amount that gets stored does actually cause a speed drop for the train, which is intentional. So you don't want to have huge amounts of stuff there because that will actually weigh down the train. And if you're in a situation where you need to suddenly get a bit more speed, what it will be able to happen is I want to have an option for being able to essentially jettison scrap. Because that way then it's sort of a cost benefit there of, yep, you are losing a whole bunch of scrap, but on the upside, you're also then being able to actually go a lot faster. And then if I add in just the final siphon upgrade, then we'll be able to siphon the large objects as well, which we can see those hoovering in. So those objects also need to be textured as well. And we'll see it's also better at the hoovering, and that's an intentional thing as well. So as you upgrade it, not only does it manage to hoover more, it can hoover better and can do so at full speed. So that massively boosts the collection rate, because if you're able to collect at higher speeds, then as we can see, you start to really boost up. But the cost is our power. We have a massive power delta, because not only do the carriages weigh more as they get bigger, they actually use more power. So things like those siphons, yep, they're more effective, but they use more power. So that's something where you may intentionally have to actually slow down so that you can be able to actually keep the train running, to have it be sustainable. So that's something where at the moment that's actually struggling quite a bit, but that's where I'm going to chuck in the remaining solar upgrades, and that will give it a bit more of a power boost. So unlock those, and it's still going to run into a little bit of an issue, but I can also chuck in a couple more solar ones. I'll get rid of the siphon and storage, and I'm just going to add in a few more ones. So it's giving us a little bit of a boost. But we are using a huge amount with those siphons. And this, if we head into this scenario where we are out of power, then we can actually very easily end up stalled. So this is going to be one of the things that people need to balance. And can see what happens there where the objects have just gotten stopped. So this is something we do need to be cautious of, and I've managed to also get stuck. But I also conveniently have access to be able to just pick up the player and move them. So that's going to be something where if you fall off, there's going to be some specific animation, well, not animations, but some specific moments that actually happen there with that. But did manage to get a little bit stuck and glitched there. Something seemed to go odd with Unity, and it was very not happy with what was going on there. But I'll actually start us moving again. And we'll go for half speed will be enough. Should be able to still collect scrap at that point. And we can, power is going down, but it's dawn is sort of hitting, so that power delta, and this will be a really important thing for players to keep an eye on, because if the train stops, you're going to be in a very bad spot very quickly. It's going to be a thing that keeping on moving is going to be how you ensure safety. So that's going to be something that will be really important for folks to keep an eye on. So you can see we're hoovering up stuff happily at the moment. We will hit the point of being full before too long, and as we saw, they just fall to the ground. So that's sort of the key thing there. The other thing that I've done is because there is now a lot of this text in here, so there is a lot of text, and with that, one of the things is some of this text is going to be quite important for people to be able to read. So for example, in the upgrade section, there are all of these different upgrades that need to be able to be read so that you know what you're going to purchase. So with that, that means that this stuff has to be legible. So it has to be something where people can actually easily pass this information. So what I've done is in the settings, I have an option for it can be switched to the Open Dyslexic font. And that's something where as soon as I do that, it switches automatically over. So this is a fairly cool thing that I've put together for this. I now in the game, there is this font manager, which has this scriptable object that I can populate while I've got a scene open. And what it does is it builds up a mapping of all of the, in this case, TextMesh Pro, bits of text that it can find. It stores the full path to them, because that's something that I can safely serialize across different scenes because it's just text. It serializes their current size, so I build the UI at a particular size. I indicate whether it's something that can automatically switch the different fonts, because there might be some ones that can't, because I might be using a special font for indicating something. And then I have the general settings of, okay, well, here's the default font that you use, and here's the Open Dyslexic font and a size delta. I found that it worked pretty reliably that I actually could just have a fixed size delta for the Open Dyslexic font. And then what happens is the font manager on load just runs this synchronize, which goes and updates all of the fonts. That goes via the object here, which it builds up a map of all of the data that it's got, finds all of the text in the UI, and then goes through and updates it. Has stuff here for managing to populate it, and that can update existing ones. So the idea being that this is something that I can use across multiple different scenes, which is really handy. That's something that means that I can easily just update stuff for the entire project. And that's a big thing. Being able to support switching to a font that's going to be easier for folks to read is something that can actually take a bunch of time to do that. But with this font manager set up, it's actually really easy. So that font manager is something I'm going to end up building into the Unity template at some point, because that's something that I want to be making broader use of that in all of my projects. So having that font manager will make that actually pretty trivial to do, because it will be a matter of go in, hit the generate on the scriptable object, that adds in the records, done. So it makes it super easy to support it, which means that I can then it'll be just an automatic thing that in all the projects it will be there. The other thing that I'm going to be sharing info on is the Sobel Effect. So the Sobel one was a little bit of jumping around to actually make it work with HDRP. It did take quite a bit to make it work with HDRP, just because the different ways that stuff is accessible in HDRP is quite a bit to actually work with. Now, one of the things with this Sobel Effect is very, very heavily based upon work done by Stephen Sell. They made their stuff available under MIT license. It's really, really great. Really recommend it. So their stuff is worth checking out. That was the basis for this. Getting this up and running was quite tricky, in that there were a bunch of things I wanted to change with the shader. So the version that Stephen uses a simplified set of samples. It takes 4 samples. I'm doing a full Sobel one of sampling 8 points around every pixel So it is a little bit more expensive, but I found that it worked better. I also don't use the base Sobel function. I use this Sobel SHA one, which I found also works better. So that's going to be included. I'm going to be doing a tutorial on that, of creating a version of this specifically in HDRP, because it is quite different. There are quite a few differences in terms of how we set up some of the stuff here for the actual C# side that binds the post-processing effect, and there are some specific quirks with the shader of how we have to access things like depth information, how we access stuff like the normal information. That setup is quite a bit different, so I'll run through that in the tutorial there. But it works really well, really happy with the visual effects that I'm getting from it. Thanks folks, I hope you found the update interesting. There's going to be a bunch more ones in future as well, because I want to continue updating. The focus for me at the moment is on getting the upgrade system in from the player-facing side. So being able to purchase upgrades, having stuff like cost and things like that working, and sorting out some general bugs there. That's going to be the big focus at the moment, and what I'll be looking at in the next video most likely, because that's something that really want to get that up and running, because that's pretty much one of the big key remaining things. There's obviously still painting all of the objects, but that's something that's a relatively known quantity of how long it will take. There's not too many things there that are a major pitfall that I'm worried about going wrong, at least at this stage. But I hope you found it interesting. As I said, a couple of those areas I'm going to be doing tutorials on those, so you'll have those as something that will be hopefully helpful in your own projects. And if you've got any questions, chuck in a comment below. And until next time, bye.